Today in the news, the Congress of former people deputies of the former Soviet Union, the Russian-German crew in space. The situation in Pridnestrovia remains tense. Israel is anxious over the worsening relations with the U.S. Will apartheid continue or not? The referendum in South Africa. Good evening. That was a short list of today's main events. However, of course, the news media was focused on events in Moscow connected with the Congress of People's Deputies of the former USSR and the rallies held on Manevsky Square in Moscow. Of 2,500 People's Deputies, 1,400 were expected to attend, as the organizers reported yesterday. But in the Hall of Culture at the Moscow Collective Farm, where the Congress was held in the end, only 250 People's Deputies and 150 invited guests attended. Events unfolded like a detective novel from morning on. Today is March 17th, Moscow, Manevsky Square, Moscow Hotel. I won't give a detailed evaluation of events because the moral, political, military evaluations will come in time. Now, I'd like to tell you a little about the detective novel plot of the work of this Congress. All of the people shown here have no idea where and when the Congress work will begin. Tell the Democratic press, not me. You don't have to convince me. Tell them. Please tell the Democratic press where and when the Congress will open. You listen to this woman. She has very interesting information. Tell her. It'll be today in Moscow. Viktor Ilyich, yes. Where do you plan to hold the Congress? We plan to hold the Congress in the Podolsky district. We have a very great problem with transportation. The group of buses reserved and paid for didn't arrive for some reason. However, within a few hours, the buses did come, and the delegates left for Podolsk, although they ended up at the Voronov Collective Farm. All the same, we do have information. The Congress lasted an hour and a half. Political intentions of the Congress were adopted and shown. An elective head of state will take place and a USSR government will form. However, on the blank, the question was, what is happening in the country today? The Congress adopted a series of measures. They adopted a continuously functioning presidium of the Congress of People's Deputies, headed by Sojet Umalatova. Today, it's no coincidence that today was chosen for the Congress. As you know, last year, on March 17th, the referendum on the Union was held. It's not very realistic to turn the country back, although you can have as many beautiful slogans as you want. In this city, they've written and spoken a lot lately. However, by my clock, it's now 5:30 p.m. in Moscow. There are approximately 30 to 40,000 people gathered on Manevsky Square. I'll tell you immediately that there were no ad-lib speeches or slogans coming from the podium today, and there was no originality in the crowd. Sojet Umalotova's speech had some dark moments, of course. This was to destroy everything and bring everything new and bring back the old. It was an interesting combination of red, black, yellow, and white banners of the communists with the black-bearded figure of Great Russia. There's no need to forbid rallies if we don't want to advertise the intents of these organizations. So you can see this rally is going on. I believe that it's going on fine. The idea of uniting people versus the friendship of peoples, this is one of the old slogans. And also the topic of the meeting, but the question is how? What's being offered? What's created here? There's no foundation. They're not capable of doing anything. And also, these organizers aren't proposing anything new. The agenda included 5 points. The organizers read a resolution and asked people to consider these points adopted: the restoration of Soviet power, the restoration of the 1917 borders, the restoration of the Komsomol, the trial of the mayor of Moscow, and they also collected signatures demanding Yeltsin's resignation. Representatives propose electing General Makashov and Rodionov to head the union. According to police reports, up to 50,000 people gathered on the square. 1,700 militiamen were on hand, along with 500 Special Forces troops. Ardan Nikolaevich, it's now 7:00 p.m. How would you evaluate this situation at this point? The situation is peaceful, as we proposed and hoped. While we watch, all is going well. The situation is peaceful and under control. I believe it'll remain this way till the end. Was anyone detained? No, the militia didn't detain anyone. Not anyone? No, not one. No, we just brought in one person. It was a teenager waving around a ball hockey stick. Today, of course, the events brought on a wealth of reactions that were obviously polar opposites. The Russian Procurator Stepan Kov announced that he intends to try all attendees of the Congress of Former People's Deputies and former People's Deputies under Article 64 and Article 194 of the Criminal Code for treason. Deputy Golik at the Congress today called it a legal organ representing the entire population of the country. We won't comment on the situation. Therefore, we addressed comments to a professional lawyer, Professor Yakovlev. There was an agreement to maintain the union. Well, it wasn't an agreement, it was a pseudo-agreement. But when the republics announced at the Belarushki Woods, you could argue, do three republics have the right to state the will of others? But when the republics met at Almaty and said there's no more agreement to have a union, it vanished along with the union constitution and all union organs. All union organs now lie beyond this general agreement. It was on that day that they finally rejected the union. And what's going on now, without that general agreement, can't claim to represent the will of the union. And my colleagues, the former People's Deputies of the USSR, should remember that it was at the last Congress that we adopted a law on the organs of power during the transitional period. The Supreme Soviet was mentioned, but not the Congress as a whole or an organ of the USSR. There's no law on that. We repealed it ourselves. At the last Congress, that's how it was. So how can they now, despite all their resolutions adopted, despite all these resolutions adopted with a quorum of all delegates representing the Congress, how can they try to restore what was in this way? These are the consequences of that action. I'm sure that all here, all these observers, still worry about one problem. Which problem? The problem of maintaining our unity. But how to resolve this question of the future? We must not look back, or we must look forward. We need to strive for a new foundation, a new agreement. I would call this action illegal, and whatever these deputies call themselves or called on people, deputies of the USSR or whatever, they do have the right to meet peacefully. And if it's a peaceful meeting, then what basis is there for holding them accountable as criminals or calling them treasonous? I don't see any basis for this. In the end, God be with them. But we're Democrats only if we allow people whose views we don't agree with to express them. Today, we received a report that the government of Moscow will submit for popular debate a draft provision and the procedure for holding rallies, marches, demonstrations in streets, squares, or other open spaces in the city of Moscow. On the whole, the document looks like a registration form, which is footnoted with the definition of the terms rally, meeting, march, etc. The government believes that in this way, Muscovites will become literate and organized when holding mass meetings. However, the still unenlightened St. Petersburg residents also held rallies today. These measures speak more and more loudly about the situation in society and the dissatisfaction with the elementary life problems. Palace Square. Today, the usual calls sounded. Down with the president. We remain a union. These rallies were attended on the the anniversary of the all-union referendum on the Union. However, those attendees live outside of the political situation in today's time. Today, Petersburg residents are mainly concerned with life problems, food, housing. Traditional picket lines near the palace addressed the opening session of the city Soviet. They protested against the current authorities, questioned the legality of the parliament, and shouted for the mindless restoration of the Union. Only a few People's Deputies of the former Union left the district for Moscow. At Smolny yesterday, only 19 people signed a political statement declaring that the Congress was inexpedient. It's argued by certain political forces, those which voted versus Sakharov's propositions, those which voted against the proposals of the interregional group. Despite the intense passions on Earth, the Soyuz 14 ship launch took place at 1:53 Moscow time. I'll let our correspondent tell you about it. Alexander Terenko, the ship